The topic of today's is structure and functions of exocrine glands. So, the glands, as such, as defined as the glandular epithelia are tissues formed by the cells or specialized to produce some secretions, maybe a mucin or any type of the secretion is called as the glands, and aggregation of the glands into a definite structure for the purpose of secretion and excretion is called as a gland. What is a secretion? If substances are produced elsewhere in the body, they are called as the secretions. And excretions, if products are discarded from the body, they are called as the excretions. So, now we will see what are all the exocrine glands. So, the definition of the exocrine glands is these are the ones which send their secretions through ducts directly into target organs of the body. Means these are the glands which produce certain type of the secretions and going to send it into the organ. For example, the salivary gland, pancreas, bile, and many more type of the glands are exocrine glands. Whereas the endocrine glands, which we are going to discuss them later, are the ductless glands of the endocrine system that secrete their products or hormones directly into the blood vessels. So we know that many type of the endocrine glands are there, starting from the pineal, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, then the pancreatic islands of Langerhans and many more type of the glands, including the ovary and testes, which secrete the estrogen and the testosterone respectively, with corpus luteum secreting the progesterone. So these are all called as the endocrine glands. So there is a basic difference between the exocrine and endocrine glands, whereas the endocrine glands are the ductless glands, whereas the exocrine glands are having a specific type of the ducts. They are secretory ducts, and the products which are produced by the endocrine glands are the hormones, whereas the secretory products of exocrine glands are the sweat, enzymes, mucus, sebum, and many more type of the substances. Sometimes the enzymes also. So the route of secretion of the endocrine glands is directly they are released into the bloodstream, eventually reaching the target organ. And they have got the close proximity with that of the blood vessels and release within a flash of the seconds. And secretory products are released to an internal organ or external surface, the duct, for example, sweat. Whereas the examples of endocrine glands, already it is told that the thyroid, starting from the head, the pineal gland is an endocrine gland, followed by the hypothalamus is also considered as one of the endocrine gland, which secretes many type of releasing hormone, followed by the pituitary gland, and on the sides of the neck, the thyroid glands, and the pancreas secretes the insulin and glucagon, followed by the adrenal gland, which secretes the adrenaline, and also the testes or ovaries respectively, which produce the testosterone, and the ovaries to also produce the estrogen as well as the progesterone whenever there is a corpus luteum. So these are all the glands. Whereas the examples of the exocrine glands are the salivary glands, pancreas, liver, Brunner's glands, esophageal glands, and almost all the secretory glands of the intestine, salivary glands, and many more type of glands are there. So, what is the function of the exocrine glands? So, the number one, the digestion of the food and absorption of the many type of the nutrients, protect the inner lining of the organs. For example, mucin is secreted in the stomach by the cuboidal cells of the gastric parietal cells to protect the gastric mucosa from the production of lot of acids and control of body temperature. The sweat is the one which is controlling the body temperature, lubricate the hair and skin by the sebum. And glands have got several type of the secretory type of the cells, like in simple tubular cells, which are having a very specific duct, and the secretory portion is filled with the one which has to be secreted. For example, one of the best gland to say example is the udder. It's also a gland which secretes the milk and also the simple bunched tubular type of the organ. So it's a bunch type of the organ, whereas simple cooled tubular type of the organs and simple acinar cells and branched acinar cells and compound acinar cells, compound tubular cells, and also compound tubulo-acinar cells. So these are all the main anatomical structure of the different glands which are present in the body system. So the some epithelial cells are converted to specialized type of the cells which secrete some material which is required for the body for the digestion or maybe cooling or many more type of the function. So it is an organ of secretion made up of specialized secretory cells derived from surface epithelium on which it occurs, like all these type of the things. And the general features of the gland are present as discrete organ or inside the layers of the viscera or epithelial in origin, means from surface of the skin, etc. Then functional unit of the gland is formed by a very specialized cell which are called as the secretory end pieces, and fluid secreted by the glands may contain so many type of the enzymes, mucus, hormones, protein, fat, etc. For example, the snake venom, it's also going to secrete the venom from a special organ, from its the teeth, etc. So these are all the exocrine glands. It's a special type of the salivary gland of a snake, and general features of the glands are they have got the rate secretion is modulated by both nerves and also the hormonal influence, and secretory piece of some exocrine gland is surrounded by star-shaped contractile cells. For example, the acinar cells of the udder are surrounded by the myoepithelial cells which are called as the myoepithelial cells. So they are going to contract and make the content of the gland to expel. For example, this is the basal lamina with the myoepithelial cells, and this is a secretory cells. So this is the structure. It is secretory and piece, and it is called as the intercalated duct. So whenever there is a contraction of the myoepithelial cells, then there will be secretion from the special type of the glandular tissue. So this glandular epithelium do contain a special type of the duct. That's why they are called as the glands with duct, whereas the hormones are produced from the glands which do not have the ducts, and directly they secrete the products into the blood. And glandular epithelium is lining which is surrounded by a special type of the secretory units. Here you can see that these are all the secretory units. So the development of glands is by the cords of epithelial cells from the surface of membrane, and this is the proximal part and distal part of a gland, and it imaginates into underlying connective tissue and form two type of the parts, that's the proximal part and distal part of a gland, but not this is not limited to all type of the structures but specialized in certain specialized exocrine glands. And the exocrine glands do have the two type, one is the proximal part, second one is the distal part, and the connected secretory piece with a surface epithelium, and that's called as the duct, and the differentiated into the secretory cells. This part is mostly the secretory cells and secretory end piece. Then these are going to pour the secretion through the ducts directly on the surface of glands or epithelium through a very type of the duct, just like the gall duct or bile duct, etc. So they are apart from the very special type of the tissues like other cells of the body, and the endocrine glands do have the proximal part and also the distal part, and the ductless gland. These do not have the duct, and they are close proximity with that of the blood vessels and form islands of secretory cells permeated, surrounded by the blood capillaries, and they pour their secretion to directly into the blood through the blood capillaries. So this is the capillary cells, and the secretory substances like the hormones are directly absorbed into the circulation. Hence, they are called as the ductless glands. And the classification of the glands in general based on site of secretion, like exocrine with ducts, or they may be unicellular glands or multicellular glands also, whereas the ductless glands are endocrine glands, and they form the cord and clump type or follicular type. Two types are there. Whereas the exocrine plus endocrine glands both are there, that is the pancreas and liver. So the pancreas secretes the insulin also, whereas the paracrine glands are the one just like the amine precursor uptake and decarboxylation, means diffuse neuroendocrine system. They are embedded with both type of the systems, and they are called as the APUD, amine precursor uptake and decarboxylation. So the classification of the exocrine, let us focus today on the exocrine glands, and on tomorrow or in other classes we will classify what are all the endocrine glands and endocrine plus exocrine. So they are called as the unicellular and the multicellular glands. So the unicellular glands are called as the goblet cells, then multicellular glands are called as the mucinogenic glands or the droplet type of the glands, and they also do contain the mitochondria, nucleus, Golgi complex. Almost all the cells in the body do have the basic structure, and including the exocrine gland cells. The multicellular exocrine glands are based on branching pattern of ducts like the simple multicellular exocrine glands, where these are not going to branch, and these are very simple type of the glands, whereas the branched are having more acinar structures and branched like this. So the multicellular exocrine glands are based on shape of secretory end piece, like tubular. If it is having the tube type of the structure, then it's called as the tubular cell. Sometimes they are also called as alveolar cell, like the acinar cells, and the cells of the lungs and also the milk glands are called as the acinar cells. Whereas tubulo-alveolar means it's a fusion of the tube type of the structure followed by the acinar type of the structure. Whereas the multicellular exocrine glands are based on nature of secretion, like number one mucus, serous, and mixed type of the seromucus. So here you can see the mucus is only secreted in such type of the glands. For example, certain glands of the intestine secrete only mucus, whereas the serous means a myoepithelial cells. So they produce the serous type of the secretion, whereas some of the glands like serodemulin means sero or mucus type of the glands are there, whereas the multicellular exocrine glands are based on manner of secretion, like merocrine glands, like secretion from or in the form of the granules. Apocrine means the glands which are detached from the during the time of the secretion. Halocrine are also the glands which are fused together to release the content, and cyto means cell. Just like the ovary, etc., they are going to exocytosis and cause the ovular fluid and develop the gland. Just like this is the ovum, egg, and it is released into the fallopian tube, and later the corpus luteum is formed. And this is going to develop as the mature follicle, and once it ovulates, then corpus luteum is going to be formed. And if there is a pregnancy, then corpus luteum develops to the greater extent throughout the ovary, and all the developing glands are suppressed. So there are multicellular exocrine glands are there, and the this is based on the development type of the glands. For example, the ectodermal, then endodermal, then mesodermal. So here you can see the ectodermal means the 16-day-old embryo with ectoderm, outermost coat, mesoderm in between the coat, and endoderm means the layer containing the what you call as the nervous tissues, etc. And mesoderm is having the muscle connective tissues. Whereas the exocrine glands based on number of ducts, simple or compound. And once again, the shape of glands simple tubular, alveolar, simple branched, simple coiled tubular, compound tubular or acellar, and compound tubulo-acellar or acinar cells. So based on number of ducts, how many number of ducts are there means the secretion poured into the surface by unbranched duct means a simple type of the duct, whereas the compound duct are branched one to form elaborated complex of the duct system, and each smaller terminal duct receive secretion from its own secretory end plate, and these ducts unite to form larger ducts which finally drain into the surface. So here later we will see the examples for each type of the gland, and coming to the first one, the shape of secretory end piece like tubular, it is a simple or compound, and secretory end pieces are like tubule, and these are straight, branched or coiled. So the example of simple tubular cells is the intestinal crypt cells which secrete the mucus into the digestive chymal structures, whereas the simple coiled glands are the sweat glands, and simple branched cells are uterine glands, and fundic glands, pyloric glands, and also the glands of different parts of the stomach, whereas the compound glands are the glands of the cardiac glands of the stomach and Brunner's gland of the duodenum, means they are more and more blanched, whereas and having the combination of multiple cells, and these are called as the tubular glands. So many classifications are there, whereas the alveolar glands are the simple and also the compound, and secretory end piece is flask shaped with large lumen and unbranched or branched, both type of the things are there. For example of unbranched is the urethral glands, vulvourethral glands are there, whereas simple branched alveolar cells are sebaceous glands and tarsal glands, whereas the compound glands are the mammary gland at between puberty and post pregnancy. So, mammary gland is a compound alveolar gland, and it is developed between the puberty and post pregnancy. Then, acinar cells are mostly compound cells and secretory piece of round shape with small lumen, and mostly these are branched, or they are also called as the compound acinar cells. And the example of this one is the pancreas and also the parotid salivary gland of any animal, and based on shape of secretory piece. So it's also called as the tubulo-alveolar or acinar cells, and combination of both tubular and alveolar or acinar, mostly branched one, and compound tubulo-alveolar or acinar cells are called as the sublingual gland and submandibular gland, and lactating mandibular glands are the one. So, lactating or mammary glands, not the mandibular. And here you can see the varieties of simple tubular cells are elongated secretory portion, and mucous glands of the colon are simple tubular cells, and also the branched tubular cells are present in the glands in the uterus and also in the stomach. And the coiled tubular cells, sweat glands, is the best example, because half of the structure of these glands will be hidden inside the skin and remaining outside. Whereas the acinar or alveolar cells are small, numerous glands in the urethra, and multiple sac-like secretory parts do contain with that of the branched acinar and sebaceous glands of the skin, sebum. So these are all simple type of the glands, and compound glands are the example. First, let us see the example. Submucosal or mucous glands are the Brunner glands in the duodenum, and they have got the secretory portion and also the duct portion. Whereas the acinar or alveolar cells are sac-like secretory units with small ducts, and the exocrine pancreatic glands are called as the secretory units with small ducts. Ducts, both tubular and acinar secretory units, they cover a large ducts, and the best example for tubulo-acinar cells is the salivary glands. Whereas the exocrine glands, according to the mode of the secretion, are also known as merocrine gland, then apocrine gland, then holocrine, and cytocrine. So depending upon the type of the secretion and which type of the cells are involved in secretion of the cells. So the merocrine glands, the secretions are very simple. They will come out of the same cell by simple diffusion, whereas the apocrine means some part of the cells which are going to secrete, they will come out as such. Whereas the holocrine means whole secretory cells will come out. Whereas the example of the merocrine glands, also known as the ecrine or epicrine glands, and secretion discharged through intact cell membrane. There is no destruction or the disturbance in the cells, and by exocytosis with ease and no loss of cytoplasm here. So, what are the example of merocrine glands means? The protein content of the mammary gland, then the parotid salivary gland, pancreatic cells which secrete some enzymes, typical and atypical sweat glands. Whereas the merocrine glands do contain the nucleus containing cell outside the periphery. Then also the secretory vesicles are present inside the cell, and finally it forms a secretory content and exocytosis will happen. Then here you can see that exocrine glands are also classified as merocrine, and here they have got the nucleus, etc., but which are containing the vacuoles with the secretory substance. And based on mode of secretion, the apocrine glands means apical portion or luminal portion of the cell disintegrate into discharge its own secretion, whereas the nucleus and basal portion remain intact from which the cell can regenerate, whereas the partial loss of the cytoplasm is also another thing. And lipid content of the mammary gland, also ceruminous gland of ear, ceruminous gland, the waxes, etc., are produced from the ear, and Mons gland of the eyelid. So eyes are also going to produce the lacrimation through the lacrimal glands, and these are also called as the modified sweat glands. So here you can see that the nucleus of the secretory gland is embedded throughout the membrane and pinching above the apical portion of the secretory gland is going to secrete the content into the duct. Then the apocrine glands, the holocrine. So entire cell disintegrates to discharge itself. So this results in the death of a particular cells. And here you can see that complete loss of the cytoplasm, and the structure is there is a disintegration cells with content becoming the secretions like this, and cells dividing cells like the holocrine glands. The example of the holocrine gland is the sebaceous glands and tarsal glands of the eyelids, which secrete the lacrimation. So here the cells themselves are going to get destroyed and the death will happen. Whereas the holocrine glands or cytocrine glands are the spermatozoa from testis and ovum from the ovary, and also the bone marrow cells. So here, as it is explained, there will be degenerating corpus luteum cells will be present. Then the corpus luteum will be there, and ultimately developing corpus luteum, and the the developed corpus luteum will be there. Then slowly it is going to disintegrate. Then the Graafian follicles are formed, and secondary follicles will be formed. Then oocyte is released. Whereas all other cells are called as the primary follicular cells and primordial follicles, which are very small in structure. And later they are going to release the ovum. So this is very similar to that of the spermatozoa or the bone marrow, which secrete the white blood cells, etc. Then the cytocrine glands do also going to ovulate, and the fallopian tubes are going to collect the ovum, and that's one of the exocrine gland function. Simply the merocrine entire gland is involved in secretion of the secretory substances. Apocrine, the partially the cell is getting destroyed, whereas holocrine means entire glandular cell is going to destroy, whereas the cytocrine means the cells are embedded in a very special type of the structure, just like the ovaries or the spermatozoa producing cell. So according to the secretion, how the secretion is there means number one is the mucus. Mucus is a very thin substances or serous, then mixed. So myoepithelial cells do also contain the secretory cells, and the mixed type of the cells always do contain both serous and mucus type of the secretion. Then the serous glands and mucous glands, there is a difference. So consistency is very thin and watery, whereas the mucous glands they secrete a very thick and viscous type of the fluids. So the content is proteinaceous, then the content of the mucous cells is mucopolysaccharide in nature. The cytoplasm of the serous cell secreting cells are central and rounded, whereas the cytoplasm will be mesosgen droplets will be there. So nucleus and lumen is very small lumen, whereas the mucus containing cells are large lumen. Then cell boundaries are indistinct; they are not very well defined. Whereas the mucus secreting cells do have a very specific type of the boundaries. So in HND staining, darkly these cells, serous cells are stained, whereas they are lightly stained in case of mucus secreting cells. And function of enzymatic action, then protection, and also the lubrication. For example, the example of the serous producing glands is the parotid saliva, which is containing varieties of the copious structures, whereas the mucus is sublingual glands which produce the saliva. Both are going to produce the saliva, but the consistency, etc., will be different. The acinar or gland cells, thin, watery secretion, rich in enzymes, protein in nature. Then cells are pyramidal and small, whereas the cytoplasm of this is granular in structure, whereas rich in rough endoplasmic reticulum. So these stain darkly whenever HND stain is poured on it. The nuclei are round and basal central size of the lumen is very small. Then functions are enzymatic in nature. The classical example of serous or acinous glands are the parotid and lacrimal glands. Then mucous or acinous glands, the secretion will be there and stain very lightly. And example is sublingual glands like this. They do contain the mucous acinous cells. So here also the outline is there. Inside this one there will be a lumen, and from the lumen the saliva or any other sublingual glands are there, and function of the secretory part of these glands is the protection and lubrication of the cells. Then mixed glands are always serous demil cells. So they are having crescentic caps on mucus acini. There will be a cap. Then serous acini and mucus acini do have many type of the difference, starting from the compound alveolar to compound tubular cells, whereas the serous acini may show very small lumen, or mostly the lumen is obliterated, and mucous acini of the mucous gland do show a very wide lumen. So these serous cells may be present as demyelin or in the mucous acini, whereas the mucous acini cells are not present as demyelin or the uh, serous acini, and the staining of serous acini will be very dark, whereas the mucus will stain light. So similarly, many type of the differences are made based on simply staining one, their function, and the chemical sequence of such secretory material, and also from the structure, just like the mucous acini cells, their nucleus is flat, whereas the serous acini it is rounded, etc. So such micro differences are always present. And coming to the salivary glands of a human being, classical example is submaxillary gland and sublingual gland and parotid salivary gland. And in most of the domestic animals also, similar type of the salivary glands will be present. But the simple thing is the anatomy of them is little bit different. Salivary glands are exocrine glands with ducts directly connected into the buccal mucosa and produce lot of quantity of the saliva in a day. The quantity of the saliva that is produced by a adult ruminant cow, etc., is about 70 to 80 liters. The function of the saliva is to moisten the food, lubricate, and the moistures keep always moistened the mouth cavity with that of the mucus containing. And many time the initiate digestion of the carbohydrates. Then the two types of the salivary glands are the parotid salivary glands, submandibular, sublingual salivary glands. And parotid salivary glands, as shown in this picture, they are very close to that of the upper mediolateral part of the ear and the lingual in tongue, palatine in palate, and tonsils to also going to secrete some of the lymph, etc. Then the buccal in case of the cheeks, because the small glands are also present, exocrine glands. They are known as the buccal cheeks. For example, this is a photo in the human which contain the parotid duct, which is open in the upper maxillary sinus, and also the tongue is the one which always mixes the mucus secreted from different type of the glands. Parotid gland is present below the ear, whereas it is always associated with the masseter muscle, and it's a very small gland. Whereas the sublingual glands are also spread from the base of the tongue to the anterior, and mandibular duct will be submandibular duct will be there, and it can supply the required quantity of the secretions of many of the countries and convert them into some products which may be very useful to that of the human being, etc. So the salivary glands we will detail little in detail, like parenchyma, then stroma, and the it is a compound alveolar type of the cell, and cross section is depicted in the right side of the photo, where with the cross section shows that these glands always to contain producing the saliva. So structural organization of the salivary gland, please see the different structure like parenchyma, then stroma, then ducts in between these things, then capsule, then interlobar receptor will be present inside the salivary glands, and later they are going to be secreted into the buccal cavity. Then general architecture of salivary gland is they are called as the secretory part and also the conducting part. Or conducting part is called as the duct, and the stroma is a very similar to that of a septa, means interlobular septa, or interlobular septa was also present. And nowadays, as the milk is not given to the calves, so these type of the things are really salivary glands, parenchyma, and secretory part will be there with serous, mucus, and mixed glands. So we can see the structure, and to get such type of secretion, always the myoepithelial cells do play an important role. So here you can see in case of a salivary gland, the alveolar structure cells will be very specialized to secrete the content which is required to the animal. So this is integrated duct will be present. Then coming to the lower part, always we are focusing on the upper parts, but the lower part is also called as the squamous epithelial-like cells. So they will be doing their work without any commanders. Hence, these type of the fruits are called as the very fruits of the poor people. And the simple columnar epithelium regulates the water and electrolyte contents of the saliva. And the striated ducts is very similar to that of the normal cell, and it also contains the nucleus, nucleolus, and all the structure which a human being do contain. But this type of the difference is just to maintain the quality assurance. Then the parenchymatic cells are example with that of the striated ducts, then striated content will also be there, and stratified columnar or cuboidal cells is the example. So here you can see this is the acini, then intercalated duct, striated duct, and the excretory duct. So lengthy duct will be there in the parenchymatous tissues. So low cuboidal squamous epithelium and simple columnar epithelium, then stratified columnar or cuboidal cells. So same type of the cells, especially in case of histopathology. Then the serous secreting cells are very well developed, whereas the predominantly mucus secreting glands are very poorly developed. So no modification in secretion. So as and when they are produced, they are going to cause the secretion. So the salivary glands are large number of closely packed acini with ducts with scattered between them. Hence, we need to use a proper staining technique and see the tissue below the microscope. So this type of the salivary gland cells are always connected with the blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, etc. And salivary cells are always surrounded by myoepithelium. Myo means muscle, because as and when it's required, the muscles are going to become tightened and it is secreted into the required place. Yes, this is the myoepithelial cells which always contract to to do the exocytosis of the content of inside which are present in the acini. So the salivary glands are classified into the parotid salivary gland. Most of the time they are the anatomical locations. Submandibular or sublingual means in between the mandibular and below the tongue. These glands are the mixed glands and predominantly serous secreting cells. Serous plus mucus plus mixed acini, and predominantly mucus secreting cells. And mucus plus mixed acini are also pure serous acini are rare. And this is the parotid salivary gland microscopic structure. And the parotid salivary gland structures, especially the histological structure, very similar to that of the other type of the secretory cells or parotid gland. Like this, they do contain serous acini and also the striated ducts. and the plasma cells will also be present in most of the parotid and or GI glands, which are when stained with the HND stain. So submandibular cell structure will be having the serous acini, then mucous acini, then serous demi-line, striated ducts, interlobular duct, intercalated duct. Finally, the septum is going to separate, and ultimately the protection is by the capsule. So this is the submandibular salivary gland, and here you can see the secretory structures of any cross section of such glands. So such type of the cells will be seen while conducting the histology. Then submandibular is almost same. Then this is the sublingual gland, and this is the lumen of a gland. And the clinical implications of this, sometimes the adenoma, and these are called as the benign tumors arising in the glands, whereas the adenocarcinoma, they are the malignant tumors. And to treat such type of the cells or the cancers is one of the tough tasks nowadays. And there is a difference between the salivary glands of each and every animal. Simply, if one can go through the structure of the salivary glands, especially in case of the dog, followed by the rat, then monkey, and also the many pig. So they will never get trapped. So rat, the cells of them are depicted here using the some of the structures, and also the monkey, mini pig have got the lot of difference when we compare to the rat as a reference model. Dogs do also have the simple structure, but till date they will not remit the amount of the employer. So as usual, this is the same type of the expression. Mixed variety is present. Exocrine glands means the exo means outside, endo means inside. So the blood vessels, the secretion is going to directly to the blood vessels in case of endocrine glands, but the exocrine glands do not have any contact with that of the blood vessels. So the exocrine glands do contain a hollow type of the cavity inside each and every cell, whereas the endocrine cells do not. They are secreted hormones have directly inside the blood. So there is a difference between the exocrine glands and also the endocrine glands. So endocrine glands directly secrete their products called as the hormones into the blood vessels within a fraction of some seconds by sending some of the messages. So this is further classification and explanation of the duct of the gland. Then secretory material will be outside the duct of a particular gland. Endocrine glands already know we are pituitary starting from the head, pituitary main or the pineal, then thyroid, parathyroid, pancreas, also exoendocrine gland, adrenal glands, and ovaries and testes are the certain glands. So starting from head to tail, so many type of the glands are being seen. As explained earlier, they are either unicellular or multicellular, or sometimes sebaceous glands do have bunch type of the cells, and which is containing the outer root sheath and hair follicles. Then there is a remnant of inner root sheath. Then the skin interface is outside the gland. So the classification of the exocrine gland is made in several types, but there is no single type of the classification which can take up into the research. So this is a structural analogy or the imagination structures are little sketches of the compound tubular cells and compound acinar cells. They are stained as black. So the tubular and acinar cells are one with a tube type of the organ, whereas the another without any tubules. Very they are not defined very properly. So tubular, acinar, and alveolar cells can be seen. Then the sebum producing glands are also depicted in this particular slide. And this is the gland with sebum producing. It is located deep inside the tissue, but it will be slowly releasing unwanted material from its vicinity outside the skin in the form of the sebum. The branched structures always depict the thing. So this type of classification, we have learned something about compound alveolar cells like the adder of a cow. So there are many type of the classification: serous glands, mucous glands, seromucosal glands, etc. The sublingual, once again, the sublingual and submandibular salivary glands are mixed one, whereas the parotid salivary glands are serous one, and the pyloric glands of the stomach are mucous glands. So the under if you cut open this particular organ and take the histological staining, and after this thing, the staining person will also be there, and they are going to identify such type of the visualized glands. There you can see merocrine, apocrine, and holocrine. Then endocrine glands are ductless glands. They secrete the hormones directly inside a cell to the exocytosis or capillary endothelial cells. Then this is the simple tubular, then simple branch. Then the third example is simple branched alveolar cells with compound alveolar cells. Then that's about the glands, and thank you for a long presentation which took almost 54 minutes, and thanks one and for all. Bye.